No, Minseok, please stop. You're hurting me.
You stupid bitch!
Please stop, Minseok. Oh, stop, Junjae. You'll hurt him.
You did good today, Queen.
I just sat there looking pregnant.
Rose's hand flew to her mouth as another bout of nausea hit, the pregnancy making everything feel overwhelming and intense. She gripped the edge of the bathroom sink, breathing through it, when she felt warm hands settle on her waist. Sit down. Taemin's voice came from behind her, not gentle, but commanding. He guided her to the edge of the bathtub. You need to rest. I'm fine, Rose protested, but even as she said it, exhaustion pulled at her. You're not fine. You're carrying twins and you've been on your feet for 3 hours preparing for this shower. He crouched in front of her, his dark eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her breath catch even after 8 months of marriage. Drink this. He pressed a glass of water into her hands, and Rose drank because arguing with Kang Taemin when he was in protective mode was pointless. His hand came to rest on her swollen belly, possessive and warm, feeling the kicks from within. They're active today, she murmured. They know their mother is pushing herself too hard. His jaw tightened slightly. The guests will be here in an hour. You're going to sit. You're going to smile. You're not going to lift a finger. Understood? Rose couldn't help but smile. You're insufferably bossy. And you love it. He stood, pulling her up with him carefully. Now get dressed. The blue dress. It's comfortable. An hour later, the penthouse was filled with the warm chaos of celebration. Pastel decorations hung from the ceiling, a table overflowed with gifts, and laughter echoed through the space. Rose sat in the place of honor, her pregnant belly making her the center of attention, while Taemin stood nearby like a sentinel, watching everything with his usual intensity. Yura bounced over with the energy of someone who'd had too much champagne, pulling Hae-soo along with her. Rose, this is beautiful. I'm so excited I could cry. Please don't cry, Rose laughed, patting the seat beside her. Sit with me, both of you. The 3 women settled together, and for a moment, Rose felt overwhelmingly grateful for these friendships. Yura, with her infectious warmth and unconditional support. And Hae-soo, who'd been there from the beginning, who understood her in ways no one else could. Except Hae-soo seemed different today, distracted. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and she kept touching her face in a way that seemed almost unconscious, almost like she was checking for something. So, Yura said, popping a chocolate in her mouth. Twins! A boy and a girl. Do you have names yet? Rose exchanged a glance with Taemin across the room. They'd discussed this, had made the decision together, but she wanted to wait for the right moment. We have ideas. We'll see when they arrive. I bet Taemin is insufferable about the whole thing, Yura teased. Overprotective, doesn't even begin to cover it. You have no idea. Rose shook her head, but her voice was full of affection. Yesterday he actually yelled at our driver for taking a turn too quickly. The poor man looked terrified, but... She placed her hand over her belly, feeling the twins move beneath her palm. I love him more every day, even when he's being impossible. Yura squeezed her hand, understanding in her eyes. That's how you know it's real. Rose turned to Hae-soo, who'd been unusually quiet. Hae-soo, you okay? You seem somewhere else today. Hae-soo startled slightly, forcing brightness into her smile. What? No, I'm fine. Just tired from work. How's Min-seok? Rose asked, remembering Hae-soo's boyfriend who'd recently finished his medical residency. He's back in Seoul now, right? Yes. Hae-soo's smile looked almost painful. Everything's going smoothly. Really good, actually. But Rose saw something flicker in her friend's eyes, something that looked disturbingly like fear. She made a mental note to ask again later when they were alone. Something was wrong. She was certain of it. Across the room, the men had gathered by the windows with drinks in hand. Taemin stood with his back to the Seoul skyline, His posture relaxed in the way that meant he was actually completely alert, watching everything. Jiho raised his glass with his trademark grin. A dad, huh? Never thought I'd see the day. Taemin lifted his own glass in acknowledgement, his expression unchanged. Life surprises you. You keep surprising us lately, Junjae added, studying his friend with those calculating eyes. Marriage. Now twins. What's next? Running a legitimate business? Jiho suggested with mock seriousness. Yubin's deep voice cut through the humor. Fatherhood changes things, makes you think differently about risk. Taemin's eyes drifted to Rose, watching her laugh. With the women. It does. You're ready for this, Junjae said, and it wasn't a question. I have to be. Taemin's jaw tightened fractionally. They're depending on me. The conversation shifted to business. A shipment coming in next week. A potential problem with a rival gang that needed monitoring. But even as they discussed violence and danger, Taemin's attention kept returning to Rose, to the way she glowed with happiness, to the life growing inside her that was half him. The afternoon passed in celebration, in laughter and love and the joy of anticipation. When the last guest finally left and Rose's father had returned to his quarters, Taemin found Rose in their bedroom, struggling with the zipper of her dress. Let me. He moved behind her, sliding the zipper down slowly, his fingers grazing her spine. You did well today. I mostly sat there looking pregnant, Rose said with a tired smile. You made everyone feel welcome. You let them celebrate with us. His hands settled on her shoulders, thumbs working at the tension there. That matters. Rose turned in his arms, her belly pressing between them. Thank you. For this. For all of it. For making me feel loved even when I look like I swallowed a watermelon. You're beautiful. His voice dropped lower, that tone that always made her knees weak. Always. But especially now, carrying my children. He kissed her then, slow and deep, his hands careful on her body as he helped her out of the dress. They came together carefully, mindful of her pregnancy, but no less intense for it. He worshipped her changed body with reverence, showing her without words how much he desired her, how precious she was to him. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, his hand spread possessively over her belly, Rose felt completely safe, completely loved. This dangerous man who'd bought her had become everything she needed. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I know. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Sleep, little Rose. You need rest. On the other side of Seoul, Jesu's hands shook as she tried to unlock her apartment door. The baby shower had run late, and Min-seok hated when she stayed out past 9. She could already hear him moving inside, could imagine the fury waiting for her. The door swung open before she could turn the key. Min-seok stood there, and the smell of alcohol hit her immediately. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight with rage. Where the fuck have you been? His voice was low, dangerous. I told you, Jesu said carefully, keeping her tone even. Rose's baby shower. I texted you. You texted me? You think a text makes it okay to leave me here waiting like some freaking servant? His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. Get inside. She stumbled through the door and he slammed it behind her. Jesu's heart raced as she tried to think of something to say, something to diffuse the situation. Min-seok, I'm sorry. I should have... The slap came without warning, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded across her cheek, and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. You think you're so special now? Min-seok's face was twisted with rage. Hanging out with those rich bastards? With the wife of a freaking gangster? You think you're better than me? No, I never... Another slap, harder this time. Jesu fell to her knees, her ears ringing. She tried to protect her face with her hands, but he grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. You belong to me. Do you understand? Me. Not them. Not your fancy friends. Me. He shoved her backward, and she crashed against the coffee table. Pain shot through her ribs. She curled into herself instinctively, making herself as small as possible, praying it would end soon. But it didn't end. His foot connected with her side, and she gasped, trying to crawl away. Another kick. She felt her lips split, tasted more blood, felt pain radiating through her entire body. "Please," she sobbed. "Min-seok, please stop." He raised his foot for one final kick, aiming for her stomach. Hae-soo closed her eyes, bracing herself for the impact, praying it wouldn't break something vital. But it never came. Instead, she heard the sickening sound of fist meeting flesh, but not hers. A different grunt of pain. Male. Confused. Hae-soo opened her eyes and saw Ho Jun-jae standing in her apartment, his hand wrapped around Min-seok's throat. And the expression on Jun-jae's face was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen. He looked like he could burn down the entire city and not feel a thing. "Bad mistake," Jun-jae said quietly, his voice colder than ice. Then he threw Min-seok across the room like he weighed nothing. What followed was brutal and efficient. Jun-jae moved. Like violence incarnate, each punch calculated to cause maximum pain. Min-seok tried to fight back, tried to defend himself, but he was no match for someone who'd been trained to kill since childhood. Blood splattered across the walls. Min-seok's face became unrecognizable, his nose shattered with a sickening crack. Jun-jae's knuckles split open, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Min-seok went limp, unconscious, but Jun-jae didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Weeks of seeing Hae-soo's carefully hidden bruises, of noticing the way she flinched at sudden movements, of watching her make excuses. All of it poured out of him in a rage he couldn't control. "Jun-jae!" Hae-soo's voice was barely a whisper, but somehow he heard it. She'd managed to stand, was stumbling toward him on shaking legs, her arms wrapped around his waist from behind, using what little strength she had left to hold him back. "Stop, please. You'll kill him." The feel of her, broken and bleeding because he hadn't protected her sooner, broke through the red haze of his fury. Jun-jae froze, breathing hard, his entire body trembling with suppressed violence. He turned to look at her, and the devastation in his eyes almost broke her. His hands came up to frame her face, so gentle despite the blood covering them, despite the rage still coursing through him. "What the hell, Hae-soo?" His voice cracked on her name. "What the hell?" Then he was pacing, running blood-stained hands through his hair, Min-seok's blood smeared across his expensive clothes. "How long? How long has this been happening?" Hae-soo couldn't answer. Could only stand there sobbing silently, her split lip throbbing, her ribs screaming with every breath. "Answer me!" He was yelling now, but she heard the fear underneath. The terror of what he'd almost been too late to stop. 7 months, she whispered. Jun-jae released a string of curses in Korean, each word more vicious than the last. 7 months. 7 months. "And you didn't think to tell anyone? How dumb can you be?" The words should have hurt, but Hae-soo was too numb to feel anything anymore. He crossed to her in 2 strides, grabbed her hand, not roughly, but firmly. "You're coming with me." "But Min-seok." "To hell with Min-seok." Jun-jae's eyes were black with fury. "He's lucky I'm leaving him alive, barely." He pulled her toward the door and Hae-soo followed because she didn't know what else to do. Behind them, Min-seok lay unconscious in a pool of his own blood, and Hae-soo couldn't bring herself to care if he ever woke up. The drive to Jun-jae's penthouse passed in silence. Hae-soo sat in the passenger seat staring at nothing, her body aching with every breath. She could feel dried blood on her lip, could taste it metallic and bitter. Jun-jae's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it might shatter. When they arrived, she realized she'd never seen where he lived. The building was in Gangnam, all glass and steel screaming wealth. The penthouse took up the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. "Sit." Jun-jae pointed to the leather sofa, his voice flat and commanding. Hae-soo lowered herself carefully, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through her ribs. She caught sight of herself in the dark window's reflection. Split lip, bruised cheek, hair disheveled. She looked like exactly what she was. Broken. Junjae disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a first aid kit. He sat beside her without a word, opening it methodically. When he reached for her face, his hands were surprisingly gentle, carefully cleaning the blood from her split lip. But she could see the rage still simmering beneath his controlled exterior. Could see it in the set of his shoulders, the tension radiating from every muscle, the way his hands trembled slightly as he worked. Say it again. How long has that bastard been putting his hands on you? The question came quiet but devastating. Haesu kept her eyes down, shame burning through her. She didn't answer. I don't like to repeat myself. His voice was soft, dangerous. 7 months, she whispered. His anger seemed to intensify at his Haesu's confirmation. And you didn't think to tell anyone about it? He spun back to face her. That is the dumbest shit you could ever do? Rose is your best friend. Yura would have helped. I would have... His voice broke slightly. Jesus. Haesu. 7 months. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Don't apologize to me. Don't you dare. He crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're staying here, until that bastard is dealt with. That's not a discussion. But, no buts. You're staying. Haesu was too tired, too broken to argue. She just nodded. Then something clicked in her mind through the haze of pain and shame. She looked up at him, confusion cutting through everything else. Wait. How did you even know to come to my apartment tonight? How did you find me? Junjae's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. Junjae. Her voice was stronger now, demanding. How did you know I was in danger? Were you following me? He turned to face her fully, and his expression was unreadable. I've had someone watching your building, making sure you got home safe every night. Haesu's breath caught. You've been having me followed? Without telling me? Yes. Just that. No apology, no justification. Just cold confirmation. For how long? 3 weeks. Since I first saw the bruises you tried to hide at that dinner we all had a month ago. His eyes met hers, hard and unyielding. I knew something was wrong. The way you kept touching your ribs. The way you flinched when someone moved too quickly. I had my suspicions about that boyfriend of yours. So you just decided to spy on me? Anger flared through her exhaustion. You had no right. I had every right. He cut her off, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Because tonight, when my man called and said he heard screaming from your apartment, I got there in time to stop that bastard from killing you. So yes, I was having you watched. And I'd do it again. The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. He'd been protecting her without her knowledge, without her permission. It should have felt like a violation. Instead, it felt like the only reason she was still alive. Can you not tell Rose? The words came out small. Or Yura. Please. Rose is pregnant. I can't burden her with this. Junjae studied her face for a long moment. Finally, he nodded once. Fine. But only until this is handled. After that, no more secrets. He finished treating her wounds in tense silence, his touch careful despite the anger radiating from him. When done, he showed her to a guest room, luxurious and impersonal with crisp white sheets. You're taking 2 days off work, he said from the doorway. You need to recover. I can't just... That wasn't a request, sunshine. His tone left no room for argument. Rest. I'll handle your manager. The first 2 days passed in a haze. Haesu slept more than she'd slept in months, her body finally giving in to exhaustion now that she felt safe. When she was awake, she stayed in the guest room mostly, venturing out only for food and water. Junjae left early each morning, returning late. He never asked how she was feeling, never checked on her beyond a brief knock on her door with meals. His way of caring, she realized, wasn't soft or verbal. It was practical. It was making sure she had everything she needed while giving her space to heal. On the third morning, Haisu woke feeling marginally more human. The bruises were still there, her lips still split, but the worst of the pain had dulled. She found Junjae in the kitchen, shirtless, making coffee. She tried not to stare at the defined muscles of his back, the tattoos that marked his skin, the way he moved with lethal grace, even doing something as mundane as pouring coffee. She failed. He turned, catching her looking. A smirk played at his lips, but he said nothing, just handed her a mug. "You look better," he said, his eyes scanning her face clinically. "I feel better. Thank you. For everything." He nodded once. "I'm taking you to work today. Be ready in 30 minutes. The drive started in silence. Jesus stared out the window, watching Sol pass by, trying not to be hyper-aware of his presence beside her. But it was impossible. He took up so much space, commanded so much attention even when doing nothing. "You can't keep driving me everywhere," she said finally. "You have your own work, your own life. I can take the subway." "No." Just that. No explanation, no discussion. Hei-Su felt irritation spark in her chest. "That's not an answer. I can't keep depending on you like this. It's not fair to you, and I'm perfectly capable of—" "Are you?" He cut her off, his voice cold. "Because 3 days ago you were getting beaten half to death in your own apartment." The words hit like a slap. Hei-Su's face burned with shame and anger. "That's not fair." "It's reality." His hands tightened on the wheel. "Until Minseok is dealt with permanently, you don't go anywhere. Alone. End of discussion. You can't just order me around like—" The car came to a stop as the traffic light turned red. Without warning, Junjae leaned toward her. Hei-Su's words died in her throat as he invaded her space, his face suddenly inches from hers. Her eyes closed instinctively, her breath catching, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. He was going to kiss her. But it never came. Instead, she heard the click of her seatbelt fastening. When she opened her eyes, he was already leaning back, a satisfied smirk on his face. "I hope you weren't thinking I was going to kiss you." "Right, sunshine." Mortification flooded through her. Her face flamed hot, and she couldn't meet his eyes. He'd known exactly what she thought, had done it deliberately to prove a point. I didn't. Sure you weren't." His smirk widened as he started driving again, clearly enjoying her embarrassment. They didn't speak the rest of the way. That evening, Haisu tried to make dinner as a thank you. She wasn't a great cook, but she could manage something simple. Except the sauce burned while she was cutting vegetables, and smoke started filling the kitchen. Shit, shit, shit. She rushed to turn off the stove, waving a towel at the smoke. Junjae appeared from his study, his expression alert. "What happened?" "I was trying to cook and I burned. I'm sorry, I'll clean it up." Instead of anger, she saw his lips curve slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "Move." "What?" "I said move." He stepped behind her, his chest against her back, and reached around her for the knife she'd been using. "You're going to cut yourself holding it like that?" Hei-Su froze, hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. His body was solid and warm behind her, his arms caging her in as he guided her hands with the knife. "Like this," he said, his voice dropping lower. His breath was warm against her neck. Gently. She could barely breathe, could barely think. All she could focus on was the heat of him, the way his voice seemed to resonate through her entire body, the strength in his hands guiding hers. "Are you paying attention, sunshine?" His lips were so close to her ear she felt them move. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. They stayed like that for a moment too long, the vegetables forgotten. Then Junjae stepped back abruptly, leaving her cold. "Keep practicing," he said, his voice rough. "I have work." He left the kitchen, and Hei-Su stood there trembling, the knife still in her hand, wondering what the hell was happening to her. The next few days fell into a pattern. Morning drives filled with loaded silence, evening meals where they circled each other like predators, late nights when they'd both emerge from their rooms, unable to sleep, only to find each other in the living room. One night, Hae-soo found him there first, sitting in the dark with a glass of whiskey. She wore one of his shirts she'd borrowed. It fell to mid-thigh, swallowing her frame. He looked up when she entered, his eyes tracking her movement as she sat on the opposite end of the couch. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No. You?" "Never sleep much." They sat in silence for a while. Then Jun-jae spoke again. "That shirt looks better on you than it ever did on me." Hae-soo's breath caught. "I can give it back." "Keep it." His eyes held hers. "I like seeing you in my clothes." The confession hung in the air between them. Hae-soo didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to this version of him, the one who said things that made her heart race. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Taking care of me, driving me everywhere, letting me stay here." Jun-jae studied her for a long moment. "Because someone has to." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight." He stood, draining his whiskey. But before he left, he stopped beside her section of the couch. His hand came out, tilting her chin up roughly so she had to look at him. "Get some sleep, sunshine. You look exhausted." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the dark with her racing heart. A week into living together, Hae-soo was closing up at the restaurant when a male coworker, Sung-min, lingered behind. "Hey, Hae-soo," he said with an easy smile. "A few of us are going for drinks after. Want to come?" "Oh, I can't. I have a ride coming." "Come on, just one drink." He touched her arm lightly. "You never hang out with us." The door opened, and Jun-jae walked in. His eyes went immediately to where Sung-min's hand rested on her arm, and his expression went glacial. He crossed the restaurant in purposeful strides, his hand settling possessively on Hae-soo's waist. He pulled her against him, and she felt the coiled tension in his body. "Ready to go?" His voice was deceptively calm, but his eyes promised violence to anyone who challenged him. Sung-min backed up immediately. "Oh, sorry man. Didn't know she had a—" "Now you do." Jun-jae's tone made it clear the conversation was over. In the car, tension crackled between them. Hae-soo broke first. "You can't just do that. He was being friendly." "He was touching you." Jun-jae's jaw was tight. "He barely touched my arm. You acted like he was— Why do you even care?" His hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles going white. "I don't." "You're lying." He said nothing, but she saw a muscle tick in his jaw. "Jun-jae?" "Drop it, Hae-soo." But she couldn't drop it. Because something had shifted between them. Something neither wanted to acknowledge but could no longer ignore. 2 days later, Hae-soo was washing dishes after dinner when Jun-jae brought his plate to the sink. He reached around her to set it down, and suddenly she was trapped between his body and the counter. Neither of them moved. "You should step back," she said, her voice unsteady. "Should I?" His voice was low, dangerous. She could feel the heat of him, could hear his breathing, could sense the barely restrained control he was maintaining. If she turned around, their faces would be inches apart. "Jun-jae!" His phone rang, shattering the moment. He stepped back immediately, pulling the device from his pocket. "What?" His expression changed as he listened. "I'll be right there." He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "I have to go. Emergency. Don't wait up." Then he was gone, leaving her trembling against the counter, her heart racing, knowing that something inevitable was building between them, and neither of them could stop it. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since Minseok. 3 weeks of this torture. 3 weeks of dancing around something neither wanted to name. And Hae-soo had reached her breaking point. The next evening, she marched into Jun-jae's study with her decision made. He sat at his desk, laptop open, several phones arranged beside him. He looked up when she entered. "I'm leaving," she announced. "Tomorrow. Minseok hasn't bothered me in 3 weeks. I don't need protection anymore." Jun-jae's eyes returned to his screen. "No." One word. Flat. Absolute. infuriating. What do you mean? No? Haesu felt anger flare hot in her chest. Exactly what I said. No. You can't just decide that for me. This is my life. My decision. He still didn't look up, which made it worse. I appreciate everything you've done, but I can't stay here forever. Her voice rose. You're not my babysitter, Junjae. I demand to leave this penthouse. Finally, he stood. The movement was deliberate, controlled, and suddenly, Haesu was very aware of how much bigger he was. He walked around the desk, leaning against it, arms crossed. An amused expression played across his usually cold features. He was so close now she could smell his cologne. Say that again, he said, his voice threatening but his eyes holding something else entirely. I said I'm leaving and you can't stop. She didn't finish. In one fluid movement, Junjae grabbed her by the waist and pulled her flush against him. His mouth crashed down on hers, and every thought in her head evaporated. The kiss was desperate, passionate, consuming. Months of tension exploded between them. Haesu froze for half a second, shock rendering her immobile. Then she melted completely, her hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing him back with equal desperation. His hands were in her hair, on her waist, everywhere. Her fingers traced the muscles of his back. The kiss deepened, became all-consuming, and Haesu felt like she was drowning in the best possible way. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Junjae's eyes were dark with desire. Still want to leave? Haesu couldn't form words, couldn't think past the feeling of his hands on her body, the taste of him on her lips. He kissed her again, slower this time but no less intense. Then he lifted her effortlessly, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her down the hall to his bedroom. What followed was passionate and desperate, and everything Haesu hadn't known she needed. Junjae laid her on his bed with surprising gentleness, his eyes never leaving hers as he stripped away the barriers between them. When he touched her, she felt precious. When he looked at her, she felt seen. When they finally came together, she felt whole for the first time in 7 months. He worshipped her body with reverence, erasing every mark Minseok had left, physical and emotional. His hands were both demanding and careful, claiming her completely, while somehow healing her at the same time. They moved together with an intensity that stole her breath, and Haesu surrendered to it completely, to him completely. They held each other through the night, learning each other's bodies, discovering what made the other gasp and shatter. When exhaustion finally claimed them as dawn broke, they lay tangled together, and Haesu felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. The next morning, Haesu woke slowly to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. Her body was deliciously sore in ways that made heat rise to her cheeks as memory returned. Last night, Junjae, everything they'd done. She opened her eyes to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, with a tray of breakfast beside him. Coffee, pastries, fresh fruit arranged beautifully. He was watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, something softer than his usual cold intensity. Hello, sunshine? The nickname, usually mocking or teasing, sounded different now, like an endearment, like something precious. Mortification flooded through Haesu. She grabbed the duvet and yanked it over her face, hiding from him, from what they'd done, from how much she'd wanted it. She heard him laugh, a real laugh, warm and genuine. The sound filled the room, and she realized she'd never heard him laugh like that before. Don't hide from me, he said, his voice amused. Not after last night. Oh my God, Haesu mumbled into the fabric. I can't believe we... Gentle hands pulled the duvet down until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. He was smiling, actually smiling, and it transformed his usually cold features into something devastating. You're adorable when you're embarrassed, he said, tracing her heated cheek with one finger. Though I have to say, you weren't nearly this shy a few hours ago. In fact, I believe at one point you begged me to. Don't! Jesus' face burned hotter. Please don't remind me of what I said. Why not? His smile turned wicked, dangerous. I thought it was extremely encouraging, especially the part where you said. She grabbed a pillow and hit him with it. He caught it easily, his laugh filling the room again, and Jesus couldn't help but smile despite her embarrassment. Eat, he said, setting the tray in her lap. You need your strength. I plan to make you say all those things again tonight. The following weeks were a revelation. Their relationship, if she could call it that, deepened in ways Jesus hadn't expected. Junjae still drove her to work every day, but now their conversations were punctuated with stolen kisses and lingering touches. The tension hadn't disappeared. It had just transformed into something warmer and more terrifying. At the penthouse, they fell into routines that felt simultaneously natural and surreal. He'd come home from whatever dark business he handled, and she'd be waiting. They'd cook dinner together. Or rather, he'd cook while she tried to help, and mostly got in the way. They'd fall asleep tangled together every night. Wake up to his kisses every morning. But they kept it secret. Neither ready to define what this was, neither ready to face the questions their friends would inevitably ask. It existed in a bubble, perfect and fragile, and entirely theirs. Until the night, everything shattered. Jesus was closing up the restaurant, later than usual because one of the other servers had called in sick. She'd texted Junjae that she'd be delayed, and he'd replied that he was running late too. Some business matter that required his attention. She was locking the front door, keys in hand, when she felt it. That prickle of awareness that said she wasn't alone. Jesus turned slowly, her heart already racing with instinctive fear. Minseok stepped out of the shadows. His face was still marked from Junjae's beating 3 weeks ago. The bruises had healed but left scars. A broken nose that hadn't set quite right. A scar through his eyebrow. A permanent reminder of what had happened. And his eyes were filled with pure, undiluted hatred. Miss me, baby? His voice was a mockery of affection dripping with venom. Jesus' hand fumbled for her phone in her pocket. Stay away from me. Or what? Minseok laughed, the sound ugly and cruel. You'll call your boyfriend? You think he'll always be there to save you? He advanced slowly, savoring her fear like a predator playing with prey. You think you can just leave me and live happily ever after with some rich bastard? I said stay away. Jesus' voice shook despite her attempt at strength. You're mine, Jesus. You've always been mine. And I'm going to teach you what happens to bitches who think they can run. His hand shot out, reaching for her throat. I'm going to make you regret ever. Touch her, and you'll lose that head. The voice was cold, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. Jesus' eyes flew open to see Kang Tae-min standing behind Minseok, a gun pressed firmly against the back of his skull. Minseok froze, his hand suspended in midair. You don't know who you're dealing with. I have connections. Taemin fired the gun into the night sky without warning. The sound was deafening, echoing off the buildings. Minseok jumped, terror replacing his bravado instantly. The next bullet that leaves this gun will be deep inside you if you don't run and never show your face to the pretty lady ever again. Taemin's voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it infinitely more frightening. I suggest you start running. Now. Minseok ran. Like the coward he was, he turned and fled into the darkness, and Haisu knew with bone-deep certainty that he wouldn't be back. Not after facing Kang Tae-min. Taemin lowered the gun, his expression unchanging as he looked at Jesus. His cold eyes scanned her briefly, checking for injuries. Get in the car, Miss Han. It wasn't a request. It was an order from a man who expected absolute obedience. Jesus' legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk, but she managed to follow him to the sleek black car parked at the curb. Once inside, silence stretched between them. Taemin drove with his usual controlled precision, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression giving nothing away. Mr. Kang, Jesus finally managed, her voice small. Where's Junjae? He had urgent business that required his immediate attention, asked me to pick you up as a favor. Taemin's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. Consider the situation handled. Thank you for what you did back there, Don't thank me. I was simply ensuring Junjae's investment remained secure. The word should have stung, should have made her feel like property, but Haesu understood what he really meant. In Taemin's world, caring was expressed through protection, not words, through action, not sentiment. They drove in silence for several minutes before Haesu gathered her courage. Can you not tell Rose about this, please? With her pregnancy and the twins coming soon, I don't want her worrying about me. She has enough to deal with. Taemin's jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign he'd hurt her. I don't keep secrets from my wife, Miss Han. Haesu's stomach dropped, which meant Rose would know by tomorrow, which meant Rose would come looking for answers, which meant everything was about to come out. The abuse, Junjae, all of it. I understand, she said quietly. Taemin pulled up to Junjae's building and put the car in park. For a moment, he just sat there, and Haesu wondered if he was going to say something else. Finally, he spoke without looking at her. Junjae is many things: cold, violent, dangerous, but he's loyal to those he claims as his. If he's protecting you, it's because you matter to him. Don't make him regret that choice. Before Haesu could respond, he was already getting out, opening her door with cold efficiency. She stepped out, and he drove away without another word, leaving her standing in front of the building alone. Haesu went up to the penthouse and waited. She paced the living room, her mind racing, anxiety eating at her piece by piece. What if something had happened to Junjae? What if he was hurt? What if... The front door opened. Junjae walked in, and Haesu's relief was so overwhelming her knees nearly buckled. But that relief died instantly when she saw him. Blood spattered across his expensive shirt, smeared on his hands, a cut on his knuckles that was still bleeding. He saw her and crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands immediately on her face, her arms, checking for injuries with frantic precision. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, urgent. Did that bastard touch you? No, he didn't. Haesu grabbed his hands, stilling them, forcing him to look at her. Look at me, Junjae, I'm fine. Taemin handled it. You handled it. Something cracked in his expression. He pulled her against him hard, burying his face in her neck, his arms wrapping around her so tight she could barely breathe. I can't lose you, he said against her skin, and she heard the fear underneath the words, raw and real and terrifying. You won't, she promised, holding him just as tight. He kissed her then, and it was filled with everything they weren't saying. Relief and fear and possession and something deeper. Something neither was ready to name. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. He won't bother you again. Ever. Haesu didn't ask what that meant. Didn't want to know the details of what Junjae had done in the hours since Minseok had run. She just held him and let him hold her and tried to process that she was finally, truly safe. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, both trembling with the aftermath of fear and relief. Eventually, Junjae pulled back, his hands framing her face gently. Let's get you to bed, he said softly. It's been a long night. They fell asleep tangled together, both needing the contact, both needing the reassurance that the other was real and safe and there. The next morning came too soon. At 7 a.m., the front door to the penthouse burst open with enough force to make both Haesu and Junjae bolt upright. Haesu! Rose's voice rang through the penthouse, heavy with emotion. She and Junjae were having breakfast, and she nearly spilled her coffee at the whirlwind of energy that burst into the room. Rose stood there, heavily pregnant and crying, with Yura right behind her, looking equally emotional. Behind them, she could see Taemin, Yubin, and Jiho giving them space, but clearly present. The men exchanged knowing looks, then Taemin gave a barely perceptible nod. They retreated to Junjae's study, leaving the women alone. "Why didn't you say anything?" Rose was full-on crying now, hormones clearly amplifying everything. "How dare you carry this burden alone this whole time?" Yura was crying too, rushing forward to pull Haisu into a hug. Rose joined them, and suddenly all three women were sobbing, holding each other tight. "I didn't want to burden you," Haisu said through her tears. "With the pregnancy and everything, it seemed unfair to burden you with my personal matters. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm so sorry." "You're our sister," Rose said fiercely. "Your burdens are our burdens. Always." They held each other for a long moment before Yura pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Where is that bastard now? I have freaking good lawyers that'll have him behind bars in days. His license seized? His life destroyed?" "He's handled," Jesus said quietly. "Permanently." Understanding passed between them. They didn't ask for details. Jesus told them everything. How the abuse had started when Min Seok returned from his residency. How it had escalated over 7 months. How she'd hidden it from everyone. How Junjae had rescued her and let her stay here. Rose held her hand through the entire story, crying silently. Yura's face was a mask of fury and sympathy. "I'm going to kill him myself," Yura declared when Haisu finished. "You don't have to. It's already done." As they sat there talking, Junjae emerged from his study carrying a bottle of wine. He crossed to where they sat, and Haisu's breath caught as he leaned down. "Hey, sunshine," he said softly, then kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss, gentle and possessive, and claiming her in front of her friends. When he pulled back, he held out the wine bottle. "You ladies might need this." Then he walked away, joining the men in the other room, leaving Haisu to face her friends' shocked expressions. Rose and Yura were gaping, their mouths literally hanging open. The moment Junjae was out of earshot, they both squealed like teenagers. "Tell us everything, now!" Yura and Rose said in perfect unison. Haisu felt her face burn red. We're not. He just kissed you." Rose practically vibrated with excitement despite her pregnant belly. "And he called you sunshine. Details. We need all the details." So Haisu told them. About the tension building over weeks. About the argument in his study. About the kiss that changed everything. About the night since then. "I was going to tell you guys when it was official," she said, blushing furiously. "We haven't exactly defined all of this yet." "Define it?" Yura laughed. "Honey, that man just kissed you in front of your friends. That's pretty defined." Rose opened her mouth to respond, then froze. Her face went pale. "Rose?" Haisu grabbed her hand. "What's wrong?" Rose looked down. Water pooled beneath her on the couch, spreading rapidly. "Oh," Rose said faintly. "Oh no. Oppa!" Yura's scream could probably be heard in Busan. In the study, Taemin's head snapped up. He was moving before Yura even finished screaming, crossing the space in long strides. He took one look at Rose and shifted instantly into command mode. "Yubin, bring the car around. Jiho, call the hospital. Tell them we're coming. Junjae, I'll handle everything here," Junjae said immediately. Taemin lifted Rose carefully, cradling her against his chest. She was breathing hard now, the first contractions hitting. "It's okay," he said, his voice, different than Haisu had ever heard it, still controlled but gentler. "I've got you." "The babies. Taemin, it's too early." "They're fine. You're fine. We're going to the hospital now." Within minutes they were gone, Taemin carrying Rose to the car, Yura and Yubin following close behind. The penthouse suddenly felt very empty and very quiet. Haisu stood in the living room, staring at the wet spot on the couch, her heart pounding. "She's going to be okay," Junjae said from behind her. His hand settled on her shoulders. Taemin won't let anything happen to her. I know, God, she's having the babies. Right now. She's having the babies. Come on. Junjae turned her to face him. Let's get to the hospital. The hospital. Waiting room felt sterile and cold despite the warm lighting. Haesu sat beside Junjae, her knee bouncing anxiously. Yura paced back and forth, unable to sit still. Yubin stood by the windows, his massive frame tense. Jiho checked his phone constantly for updates he knew wouldn't come any faster. Junjae's hand found Haesu's, squeezing once. She looked at him, surprised by the gesture of comfort, and found something soft in his usually cold eyes. She's strong, he said quietly, and Taemin's with her. She'll be fine. Hours crawled by. Yura wore a path in the waiting room floor. Haesu's anxiety manifested in silence, her hand gripping Junjae's like a lifeline. Every time a doctor appeared, they all jumped, only to deflate when it wasn't news about Rose. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the delivery room doors opened. Taemin emerged, still in the scrubs they'd made him wear, and every head in the waiting room turned to him. His face was unreadable as always, but Haesu noticed something different. A slight softness around his eyes, a barely perceptible ease in his shoulders. They're here, he said simply. A boy and a girl. Rose is fine. They're all fine. Yura burst into tears immediately. Yubin's hand came to rest on his wife's shoulder, and even the massive enforcer looked suspiciously emotional. Jiho grinned widely, clapping Taemin on the shoulder. Can we see them? Yura asked through her tears. Give them a few minutes. They're cleaning the babies, getting Rose settled. Taemin's hand went to his pocket, and Haesu realized his hands were shaking slightly. The only outward sign of what he'd just been through. Then you can come in. 20 minutes later, they filed quietly into the recovery room. Rose lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but glowing, her hair damp with sweat. Beside her bed were 2 small bassinets, and in them, wrapped in soft blankets, were 2 tiny miracles. Haesu felt tears spring to her eyes immediately. She'd never seen anything more beautiful. Taemin stood beside Rose's bed, his hand on her shoulder. Possessive and protective even here. When he looked at his wife and children, Haesu saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Not quite softness, but something close. Devotion, maybe. Or as close as a man like Kang Taemin could get to it. They're perfect, Yura whispered, moving closer to peer into the bassinets. They are, Rose agreed, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. She looked up at her friends, at the family they'd built together. We named her Hei-ra. Haesu's breath caught. Yura's hand flew to her mouth, fresh tears streaming down her face. And we named him Yubin, Rose continued. Yubin, the massive enforcer who'd killed men without blinking, looked like he might actually cry. His jaw worked, his eyes suspiciously bright, and he had to turn away for a moment to compose himself. You didn't have to, Haesu started, her voice breaking. We wanted to, Rose said firmly. You're our family, both of you. This is how we honor that. Haesu moved closer to look at baby Hei-ra, and her heart swelled almost painfully. The baby was so small, so perfect, with tiny fists and the sweetest face she'd ever seen. She felt Junjae come up behind her, felt his presence like heat against her back. When she glanced at him, she found him staring at her, not the babies. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something intense. He mouthed 3 words, I love you. Haesu felt tears threaten to fall. She mouthed back, I love you too. The moment stretched between them, private and precious despite being surrounded by people. Then Yura squealed, breaking the spell, and everyone laughed. They stayed for another hour, taking turns holding the babies, marveling at how small they were, how perfect. Watching Taemin with his children was surreal. This cold, dangerous man cradling a tiny infant with surprising gentleness, his expression fierce with protection. Eventually, the nurses shooed them out, insisting Rose needed rest. They left reluctantly, promising to return tomorrow. In the car, Junjae drove while Haisu sat in comfortable silence beside him. Her mind was full of babies and names, and the look in his eyes when he'd said he loved her. "You're thinking loud," Junjae said finally. "Just processing. Everything. Today. The babies. Us." She looked at him. "You said you loved me?" "I did." "Did you mean it?" He glanced at her, then back at the road. "I don't say things I don't mean, sunshine." Warmth flooded through her. "Good. Because I meant it too." His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, something settled and certain between them. Days later, after Rose was released from the hospital, Haisu made it a point of duty to go to the Kang penthouse every day. She'd help with the twins, give Rose a chance to shower or nap, and marvel at how much two tiny humans could completely transform a household. Rose looked exhausted but happy, and Taimin had become even more protective, if that was possible. He rarely left the penthouse, working from home, always within earshot of his family. One night, Haisu woke at Junjae's estate to the familiar sensation of his lips on her skin. He kissed her shoulder, her neck, trailing heat everywhere he touched. She stirred, turning to face him in the darkness. "Hey, baby," she murmured, her voice still rough with sleep. "Hey yourself." He continued his assault of kisses, moving down to her collarbone. Haisu glanced at the clock on the nightstand. "Isn't it too early for kisses, babe? It's 4 a.m. in the morning." "Never too early for you, my love." He pulled back just enough to look at her, a teasing smile on his face. "Considering the fact that you're practically Rose's wife now with how much time you spend there." Haisu laughed, the sound genuine and free. "You're impossible. And you're the most beautiful woman I've ever laid eyes on." He kissed her then, and it was full of passion and desire and promise. When they came together, it wasn't soft. It was consuming, passionate, desperate. Him claiming her completely, her surrendering fully. They moved together with an intensity that stole breath and coherent thought, lost in each other completely. When it was finally over, they lay tangled in sheets, both breathing hard. Junjae held her close, his arms wrapped around her possessively, and Haisu felt completely safe, completely loved. "I'm not really a man that's experienced with love," Junjae said into the darkness, his voice unusually vulnerable. "I've never cared for weak things like emotions or feelings. World is violence and darkness and things that would horrify most people." He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her, his hand tracing gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. "I've spent my entire life being Taimin's second, being the cold one, the calculator, the one who handles problems without hesitation or mercy. I've killed men. I've destroyed lives. I've done things that would make you run if you knew the full extent of them." His thumb brushed across her cheek, his eyes intense in the dim light. "But you walked into my life bleeding and broken, and something shifted. You made me want to protect instead of destroy. You made me want to build something instead of just surviving. You made me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling." His hand slid to cup her face, his touch achingly gentle despite the violence those hands were capable of. "You're my sunshine in all this shadow, Haisu. You're the only good thing in my dark world. And I know I'm not easy. I know I'm cold and possessive and demanding. I know my world is dangerous and violent and not what anyone should want. But His voice caught slightly, and Haisu saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. "I want you. Officially. Completely. I want you to be mine in every way that matters. Not because you're staying here. Not because I'm protecting you. But because you choose me. Because you want this as much as I do." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. Be mine, Jesus. My girlfriend, my woman, my future. Be with me, knowing exactly who and what I am, and let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Tears streamed down Jesus' face, but they were happy tears. Overwhelmed tears. She'd never expected this. This vulnerable, honest confession from a man who showed the world nothing but ice. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. God, yes. I'll be yours. Officially? Officially. Your girlfriend. Your woman. Your future. She pulled him down to kiss her. I've been yours since the moment you saved me. Maybe even before that. Maybe since the first time you called me sunshine and I wanted to hit you. He laughed against her lips, the sound warm and genuine. I knew you wanted me even then. You're still impossible. And you love it. He kissed her deeper, claiming her mouth with possession and promise. Say it again. I love you, Junjae. Again. I love you. One more time. His voice dropped lower, rougher, as he moved over her again. I love you, she gasped as they came together once more. Later, as dawn broke over Seoul and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, they lay wrapped in each other. Jesus traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now? Now we live. We love. We build something real. His arms tightened around her. And if anyone tries to take you from me, I'll burn the world down to keep you safe. It should have sounded threatening, should have made her afraid. Instead, it made her feel cherished, protected, loved by a man who would do anything to keep her. I can live with that, she said, smiling against his chest. Good. Because you're stuck with me now, sunshine. No takebacks. Wouldn't dream of it. They fell asleep as the sun rose, tangled together, officially committed, officially in love. Two broken people who'd found each other in darkness and somehow created light, ready to face whatever came next together. The family they'd built, born from violence and darkness and impossible circumstances, was complete. Bound not by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, by love. That defied every odd stacked against them. And that was enough. If you loved Junjae and Haisu's journey from enemies to lovers, from darkness to light, subscribe for more stories from this world. Hit that like button if you're Team Junsu, and comment below. What was your favorite moment? The rescue? The seatbelt tease? The I love you? Let me know. Thank you for being part of this family's journey. Until next time, remember, sometimes love finds you in the darkest places and changes everything.